Happy new camera day, everyone. Fujifilm just announced a new camera body, the X-S10. It's not an XT, an X Pro, an X100, an XE, or a GFX. This is a new naming scheme for Fujifilm, and as you will find out in a few minutes, I like where they're going with this. I was able to use it for a week, and I made the most of it. I cleared a backlog of other interesting items to the side for a few days. Hint, hint. My review of the GFX 100 is coming very soon, so subscribe so you don't miss it. But autumn is officially here, which means that the weather was cooler, the leaves were changing color, and the world begged to be photographed. So I tucked the little X-S10 into my pack, along with a Fuji lens, the 16 to 80 millimeter f4, and even some adapted non-Fuji lenses. And I went in search of yellow leaves and beautiful sunsets and that one not so small canyon that is very special to me. Today I will share some specs of the camera, of course, and how they translate to the real world when we're out shooting with the camera. I'll discuss how it handled and how to use it, because no one wants to use a camera that is awkward to shoot with. And I'll also be sharing a ton more photos and videos that I captured with the camera. By the end, you will be able to take my experience, assess the results that I achieved, and decide for yourself if the X-S10 might be right for you. Right out of the gate, you may have noticed that this camera is a departure for Fujifilm. Let's address that first. Rest assured, the guts are all Fuji, but the skin is a little bit different. Rather than the traditional controls of their other cameras, where you see dials for shutter speed and ISO sensitivity, this guy gets the PASM dial treatment. That means that you're choosing your exposure mode, be it fully manual or one of the smart automatic modes, on this dial on top of the camera. For many, this can be quicker and therefore easier for you to get the shots that you want. On many other Fujifilm models, like my X100V, if you want to shoot fully manual, you'll move the aperture to your selected choice here on the lens, and then the shutter speed on this other dial on the top of the camera. If you want aperture priority, you set the shutter speed dial to automatic. If you want shutter priority, you set the aperture dial to automatic. Here on the X-S10, it's more like Nikon, Canon, Sony cameras, and some others. You simply move the dial to P, A, S, or M, and you can then use the command dials and buttons to adjust settings. You do still have the option of adjusting aperture on the lens's ring, though. For me, I was initially skeptical. I do really enjoy the tactile controls of the other Fuji cameras, but as it turns out, I don't mind the switch, which sounds funny because plenty of other cameras that I have on the shelf back there have the PASM dial, so of course I wouldn't mind it. But my point is that I'm neither complaining nor complimenting the camera for this part of the design. It's a design decision made by Fujifilm for this camera to give you options when you're shopping. And if I had to guess, that's why this camera follows a new naming scheme. And these differences may make that X-S10 the camera of choice for those who want the aspects that are unique to using a Fujifilm camera, like those 18 film simulations, but with controls that they may be accustomed to from other brands. Because while Fujifilm cameras work very well as a primary system, I know that many of you use Fuji as a second system. These are more familiar controls, and they can give you more of what you're accustomed to: the PASM dial, the grip, while maintaining full access to Fujifilm lenses and super image quality. This is a compact setup with surprisingly good ergonomics for a camera that does look a little bit angular, shares the design language of the other X system cameras. And there's a fully articulating screen. You can have it pressed against the back of the camera, or you can flip it out and rotate it so that you can see it from most any angle, including in front of the camera. So if you want to take a self-portrait or shoot video of yourself, you can see your composition and your exposure. The screen also flips around and closes up to protect the screen when you don't need it. So let's get some specifications up on the screen for you to peruse. I'll discuss some of those in a minute, but first, for those of you that might be new to Fujifilm, beyond the camera being easy to use and easy to hold, the menus and terminology are simple and well organized. And there are a bunch of customizations that you can make in the menu. The functions of buttons and dials, what shows up on your quick menu, even what information you see in your viewfinder. You can take what is already an easy to use camera and you can customize it for your preferences. But all right, enough about usability. Let's move on to what the camera can do. First, the results you can achieve. I was using a pre-production unit, so I didn't really get to explore the depth of the raw images in intricate detail. Even after the official release today, it takes some time for Adobe Lightroom, Capture One, and the others to learn the raw format unique to this camera and allow their software to work with the files properly. However, you've seen photos in this video. It obviously didn't hold me back too much. I did two things for editing the images that you're seeing in this video. First, I set my camera settings, including film simulation, for each individual situation when I was out shooting. I shot RAW plus JPEG, and in this video, sometimes you are seeing simply the JPEG straight out of the camera. That is one of the reasons that I love the Fuji film simulations so much. They give my photos depth and character without me having to sit at my computer with them. Or the other thing that I did was I edited the raw images using only the options that I had available to me in camera on the raw conversion menu. There are actually quite a few options for that. For example, adjusting the film simulations or bringing up shadows and bringing down highlights. And keep in mind that those adjustments are also things that you can set ahead of time in the image quality menu so that they're baked right into your JPEG file. Having said that, there is one exception. The sunset time lapse at the Grand Canyon. I actually took the JPEGs out of the camera and I edited them a little bit in Lightroom. Overall, the images that I captured are on par with the other recent Fuji cameras that I've used in terms of dynamic range and color, so far as I can tell. I love the Fuji colors, and I would normally not spend as much time adjusting raw images in the camera like I did. Normally I would just pull them into Lightroom or Capture One and just go from there. But this was fun and different, and I realized how many customizations there are and how flexible they are. So if you don't have editing software that edits raw images, but you want to shoot in RAW on any given day, I can say with a straight face that the camera will take care of you. Or you can use Fuji X-RAW Studio once it is updated to support this camera. It gives you all of the same in-camera options that the RAW conversion menu does, and even most of the options of the image quality menu. And it's free. I like to use it with my X100V. This camera isn't slow. It can shoot at up to 8 frames per second with its mechanical shutter, which I did. And while your buffer fills up relatively quickly, I got right around 20 frames per burst when I was shooting in RAW plus JPEG and using autofocus. That number will vary for you depending upon your settings and your memory card. But on top of that, with the electronic shutter, you can also do bursts up to 20 frames per second, or even 30 frames per second with a 1.25x crop. I don't think anyone is expecting that this camera will rip through shots like a Nikon D6. I'd argue that that wasn't even on the designer's minds, but what this means, practically speaking, is that while you can't mash down the shutter release button and take 100 photos, you can do some short bursts when needed, all with the grace and style that Fuji brings. Now for autofocus. The camera does have eye and face detect autofocus and tracking, and it does a good job. We did portraits with it, and I also had it turned on when I was taking those photos of Raymond on his mountain bike. As expected, the camera did a good job with picking up my eye for the standard portraits. Where I was pleasantly surprised with its performance was when it picked up Raymond's face when he was on his bike, still relatively far from me. And Raymond wasn't moving slowly either. Fuji says that the camera focuses in 0.02 seconds, and I definitely saw that in action and how it combined with the detection features. Is this camera class leading in terms of autofocus? No. Is this camera quite capable in terms of autofocus? Yes. I also used the camera for video quite often. The in-body image stabilization helps a lot with that because I could hold the camera when I didn't want to set up my tripod when I was out hiking, taking photos and video. You saw in the specifications list that the X-S10 will shoot in 4K at 30 frames per second, and that's typically what I use. However, you can also film in 1080p at 240 frames per second, and it automatically slows the video down for you. And it's stunning. It worked very well with the fall colors that I was documenting in northern Arizona, and I shot a lot of video. The footage is upscaled here to 4K. You also have a microphone jack, and you can use the USB-C port with an adapter if you want to connect headphones as well. These are amazing times when you can be walking around with a small camera, one that is not heavy or inconvenient, but still capture stunning scenes with capabilities that were previously only available on much larger, more cumbersome cameras, but that's not all. While in-camera video is recorded in 8-bit, over the external HDMI interface, you can shoot 10-bit video, which puts this camera on the higher end of the curve for video, especially among some of its aps-c peers in the industry. Oh, and you can shoot in F-Log, and they created a front plate for this camera that acts as a heatsink, so the camera stays cooler, which means that you can shoot for longer periods of time. In short, there's plenty to work with in this small package for both stills and video. If I had to find one area where I wish the camera did a little bit better, it would be battery life. I don't have the official word from Fuji on the shots per charge, but let's remember that this is a compact camera with a small form factor and therefore a small battery. But I did go through the battery fairly quickly while enthusiastically shooting thousands of images alongside plenty of video over several days. But I didn't make it through a day without having to charge. However, this camera can charge via USB-C while you are using the camera. So I simply carried a battery bank with me, and when I did time lapses using the onboard interval timer, using an external battery bank kept it going and going with the camera's own battery fully topped off for hours at a time. That being said, extra batteries in your bag can keep you shooting as long as you need to. In general, where Fujifilm really excels for me is their mindful approach to camera design and operation. Although the controls on the X-S10 are different from what we usually see from Fuji, the essence of Fuji, at least to me, is that you can use the automatic or scene-specific modes when you want to, set it and forget it and trust the camera to take care of you. Or when necessary, you can use the buttons and dials on the camera to get everything exactly as you want it in an elegant process. Everything on a Fuji camera feels solid and provides rewarding physical feedback. Fujifilm, like few other brands that we use, they seem to have found a certain type of magic to optimize your shooting experience. When it comes to purchasing or upgrading a camera, if there's one thing today we have more than ever, it's options. Fujifilm certainly has the X Pro 3, the X-T4, the X-T30, the wonderful X100 series, and they all have that modern vintage control scheme where you turn the dial and you're changing your settings. The X-S10 is a more modern control scheme for those who perhaps appreciate the vintage controls, but ultimately desire a more progressive experience, or someone that just really wants that deeper grip. I see this as a great move for Fuji, as they can handle being both a niche design, albeit a very popular niche with many of their cameras, and with the X-S10, they're saying, yeah, we can do modern too, and with all the same charm and characteristics as our modern vintage classics. Oh, and we can do it in a small form factor. We can maintain compatibility with our stable of wonderful lenses and give you advanced video features, all without breaking the bank. In the end, in case you couldn't tell, I really like this camera. It's safe to say that I would like to keep 9 out of 10 cameras that come through here. There are simply no bad cameras on the market today, but occasionally I feel a connection, and I definitely felt it here. I would say that I bonded with the camera. Is it the most highly spec'd out camera out there? No. but it holds its own and it's a joy to use, and you're getting a lot for the price. It's an all-around camera with an emphasis on both compactness and the mindfulness that can come with using a Fujifilm camera, whether it be an interchangeable lens aps-c camera like this, or the X100V with its fixed lens, or even the epic medium format GFX100. Now, your questions. By the time you are seeing this, the cat's out of the bag on this camera. I had to send my loaner back in, but if you do have any questions about my shooting experience with it, let me know down in the comments. And as you are headed down there, please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Remember, I do have my review of the GFX100 coming very soon. Thank you to Fujifilm for trusting me to test out this little cutie, and thank you for watching.